On this channel I've looked into the ghosts that haunt the royal residences of Buckingham Palace and Balmoral Castle, and now it's time to look at Windsor Castle. Windsor is undoubtedly the most haunted of all the royal residences, with as many as 25 ghosts reported. Located in the county of Berkshire, Windsor is one of the most impressive castles in England. The original castle was built here by William the Bastard after the Norman conquest, and since the reign of Henry I, it's been used by the reigning monarch. The history of the castle is as interesting as it is long, and really I could be on for hours if I wanted to talk about it all. It was besieged in the First Barons' War. It was made the headquarters for the Order of the Garter. King James I of Scotland was imprisoned here. King Henry VI was born here. It was seized by parliamentarians during the Civil War and used as a HQ by Cromwell, just to name a few things. But the castle isn't just impressive from a historical point of view, but also from an artistic and architectural point of view. The artwork and the building work inside here is inspiring and just so impressive, and it really is worth getting the train to Windsor when you're next near London if you haven't seen it. I know people that live down there have probably passed by so often, but I was just really impressed with my visit last year. Anyway, my focus here is on ghosts, and as I said, there are many. One of the ghosts that haunts this place is Elizabeth I. She's been seen by several members of the royal family, including Queen Elizabeth II and her sister Margaret. Quite often seen in the library, her footsteps can be heard on the bare floorboards before her striking presence appears. In the February of 1897, Lieutenant Carr Glynn of the Grenadier Guards was sitting in the outer room of the Queen's Library when a lady dressed in black walked past him and turned a corner. Intrigued by the woman's resemblance to the portrait he'd seen of Elizabeth I, Glynn followed, but could find no trace of her. Furthermore, there was no doorway through which she could have left the library. He asked an attendant who the lady was, but was told that he was the only person who had entered the library that afternoon. The attendant then raised the possibility that the lieutenant had been graced with a special sighting of Queen Elizabeth I. Elizabeth spent much of her time at Windsor Castle throughout her life, often using it for diplomatic engagements. It was her safe haven. It's no wonder then that, even in death, she still finds solace within its walls. King George III once claimed to have conversed with a spectral woman who was dressed in black and claimed to be married to England. It's long been believed that this was the ghost of Elizabeth. Also, King Edward VII confided in one of his many mistresses about his encounter with a woman dressed in black who resembled the Tudor Queen. Even George VI is said to have observed the ghost of Elizabeth I on 8 consecutive nights during the opening days of the Second World War. Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII, is also a resident ghost in Windsor. He loved Windsor, hosting many huge feasts and celebrations throughout his life here. During the Pilgrimage of Grace in 1536, when the north of England rose up against Henry's rule, the king used this castle as a safe stronghold from which to manage his military response. He primarily haunts the deanery cloisters. He's heard, hobbling around, the sound of his ulcerated leg thudding on the floor as he walks. He's also seen wandering other parts of the castle, mainly the hallways, and can be heard yelling and groaning. The second wife of King Henry is also one of the most famous hauntings at Windsor Castle. After her arrest on charges of treason, adultery and witchcraft, Anne Boleyn was beheaded at the Tower of London. It's reported that she too haunts the Dean's Cloister at Windsor Castle, where her ghostly form has been seen peering from a window where she's said to look sad, distressed, and sometimes looks as if she's weeping. Now we'll move on to Charles I. Just before Christmas in 1648, Charles Stuart was taken as a prisoner to Windsor Castle. Following his trial and beheading in London on January the 30th, 1649, his body was returned to Windsor to be buried in the same vault as Henry VIII and Jane Seymour. As the black-draped coffin was being carried towards St. George's Chapel, the sky, which until then had been serene and clear, clouded over and a sudden blizzard swept across the grounds. The black pall over the coffin was all white by the time the funeral procession had reached the end of the chapel, and many took this as a divine sign proclaiming the king's innocence. The ghost of the Stuart king has been seen on numerous occasions in the library and the canon's house. Though the king lost his head, Charles as a ghost is seen whole. The ghost of King George III has been seen on occasion, looking longingly out of the room beneath the library, where he was confined during his several periods of madness. As a sick old man, George spent much of his time at Windsor, and each day would take and return the afternoon salute of his guards. Following his death in 1820, while his body lay in state, the guards were passing the king's window when the commanding officer saw the unmistakable figure of the king standing in his customary place. Instinctively, he gave the order, "Eyes right," and as they swung round, each soldier saw the figure and watched as he returned the salute. On very rare occasions, he can be seen peering through windows and doors at the castle. Queen Victoria is also known to haunt the castle. Her reign began in 1837 and ended in 1901 when she died. She was unhappy with the alterations that her great-grandson, King Edward VIII, made to the residence. Though he was a king who never had a coronation, Edward quickly set about changing things at Windsor at the request of his unpopular American fiancée, Wallis Simpson. The work was hindered by some unexplained phenomenon when some workmen in 1936 claimed to see the ghost of Queen Victoria crossing the grounds, waving her arms and moaning loudly. Not all of the castle's ghosts, though, are royals. In April 1906, a sentry was on duty one night at the top of the pathway beyond the main entrance to the castle, when a group of men appeared from nowhere and began walking towards him. Thinking they were intruders, the sentry challenged them, but they continued to advance. When they ignored his third challenge, he aimed his rifle and fired at the leading figure. The figure paused momentarily, but then continued forward. Raising his bayonet, the soldier charged at the group, whereupon they promptly vanished into thin air. He reported the experience to his commanding officer, and a full-scale search of the castle and grounds was undertaken. No intruders were found. However, the sentry was confined to barracks for 3 days as punishment. The long walk in Windsor Great Park is stunning, although at night it can be sinister. It was here in 1927 that an 18-year-old guardsman, patrolling this area at night, was overcome with melancholy and shot himself. Some weeks later, a colleague of his, Sergeant Leake, was given the same night duty. At the end of his shift, he was pleased to hear the footsteps of what he presumed to be his relief. Instead, he found himself gazing at the face of a young boy, the same boy that had committed suicide. As he stood staring in astonishment, the genuine relief marched into view, and the apparition vanished. Back at the barracks, he reported this experience to several other sentries, who all claimed to have witnessed manifestations of their dead associate.